Yeah.
Hello, everybody. This is Tito Bort, CEO at Alti Sales, and today we have a pretty fun podcast here. I have Shawn Finder from AutoKlose joining me, and the reason we're getting together is because we were just chatting about all these problems that companies are having distributing leads. This might be like you might be doing territories or just your SDRs getting target accounts, or you have a huge list of accounts that you're trying to distribute appropriately, and then you might have new SDRs coming on. All these sorts of things, all the problems they create, and trying to come up with a way to solve it. That happened a few months ago, and we just reconnected a few days ago, and we figured out the formula to make it happen. So for the next 15, 20 minutes, we want to share with you how we got to where we got, what is this formula that we have to now distribute leads better, and how you should start like thinking about your data, your leads, your accounts, and your SDRs. So welcome to the show, Shawn. How are you doing?
I'm good, Tito. I'm very excited to be here. I think we have a lot to talk about, a lot to tell people, though, kind of going in with the new and out with the old when it comes to lead distribution.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. I mean, we both are in positions, where we talk to a lot of SDR teams. We, run our own teams, and we're living and breathing the practice of sales development all the time. So why don't we start? Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about like what are you seeing in the market? Like what are maybe some of the common ways in which people distribute leads, and what are the emerging problems in those? Maybe you start with one, then I tell another one, and then we'll share the magic sauce.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I think with everything, with software, with product, with SDRs, everything, people have to become adjust to change. And I think what everyone used to be doing, and most companies still do, which they maybe shouldn't, is they distribute their leads either by, I would say two. I'll say industries and territory. So they do it by region. They might be doing it by states, or in Canada here by province. And I think SDRs and sales managers got so used to doing that they haven't really thought of any innovative ways that might be more productive for their SDRs. So at a territory level, just doing it by states, I don't think nowadays is enough. And I think we were just discussing before, which we're going to talk about today, is some ways that people can change that and make it more productive.
Yeah, that's right. I think that one of the big problems is just following the status quo, right? Like people used to have territories because when you didn't have a computer, like it was much better to be in like on the field, just figuring out who's nearby me, drive around, look at buildings and logos and so on, and
Yeah.
that was the way we used to sell. But okay, so what's the problem with doing territories, Shawn? I mean, like, is that system really broken? Seems to be working fairly well.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's broken, but I think people now need to start thinking outside the box. So, if you're just going to do territories, every other company is doing that. Every other company is doing territories or industries. I just think you have to come outside and think, okay, what can we do differently to try and distribute the leads? And I think one of the things we were talking about earlier was, I was mentioning like kind of building a perimeter, which we'll get into, building a perimeter around your existing clients, et cetera, and almost having like a full pool at the top and have SDRs kind of grabbing from them, which we'll get to shortly. But I think there's different innovative ways that people need to do it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that picking by region or by state is wrong. I just think that there could be a different way that people can approach it.
Okay. Yeah. And I like to be more controversial in some of these podcasts. So I'll tell people it's horrible. I think that distributing accounts by territory is horrible. And the reason it's horrible is because when you distribute your accounts by territory to your SDRs, you're usually going to have SDR to AE pairings. And when you have SDR to AE pairings, something always happens, which is you're either going to have a really good SDR paired up with a fairly bad AE, or a fairly bad SDR with a really good AE.
Yep.
And those get super annoying because you can never know who is doing good and who's doing bad, because it's finger pointing back and forth. Oh, but I'm bringing a lot of leads. And they're like, no, but the leads are so bad. And it's like, but whatever, like, and nobody wants to take responsibility or accountability, right? The other thing that happens is imagine you have a dynamic duo, dude. Like these guys are killing it. You have your best AE, your best SDR, great territory. Best SDR says, now I want to get a promotion. He gets a promotion. Guess what happens? Brand new, fresh SDR into that territory. So the accounts went from being worked incredibly well by somebody to now being given to like the newest, freshest SDR. And then that will ruin pipeline for that AE and might hurt their ability to hit goals. And then that might actually even have you churn your AEs because your SDRs are either quitting or getting promoted. So I hate pairing up SDRs with AEs. And given that most AEs are still territory based, I hate AE territory, like SDR territory distribution.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, and I would say, it's like, people are changing jobs all the time. SDRs, AEs, everyone's changing jobs. So imagine you have an AE that you've trained or you've converted from an SDR to an AE and now they leave the company. Well, you might rush an SDR to an AE just because you need somebody to fill that role. So I think it's almost like you're always going to be training, because if somebody leaves, you're training somebody, and between the pointing fingers and replenishing your SDR roles and your AE roles, I think it could be a lot of confusion. And I think there could be a lot of communication issues between those two. So I definitely agree that there's a conflict there between the SDRs and the AEs.
Okay, cool. So we talked about the territory distribution to SDRs and pairing them up one-to-one with AEs. I think a slight improvement on that is doing it the second way, which is let's do target accounts. And maybe the SDRs can still have meetings with one AE, where they're like, I would call semi-paired up. So if my AE has this 10 target accounts he really wants to go after, he can meet with me and I'm his strategic partner to go after those 10. But truly at any given point, I'm reaching out to 50. So an improvement on perfect one-to-one alignment, I say, is to have 10 target accounts. We're strategic, you and I'm your SDR, you're my AE. And then the other 40 accounts I'm working across all the other AEs. And what that creates is now if I churn or you churn, the other person is not completely screwed, because I do have your strategic accounts, but if I leave, every AE is hurt equally. So that's a little bit better, but I still don't like it. And I'll tell you why. When you do that and you start distributing accounts to an SDR, you run into one of two problems. Imagine you're a company that has like 10,000 accounts. So, and you have 4 SDRs and 4 AEs. There's 2 ways in which you can give your SDRs accounts. One is to say, hey, we have 10,000, let's just give 2,500 to each SDR. And unless your SDRs are incredibly well trained on how to work those accounts and they're following very detailed sequences, what's going to happen is they're going to try to get as many meetings as possible with as many accounts as possible. And they're going to start blasting emails and annoying people, right? So that seems not to be a great strategy. The other problem is, imagine you want to grow your team from 4 to 6. Well, now, since you've distributed all your accounts to everybody, holy cow, we need to go back and take away accounts from people, and they don't want to give their accounts up, and it just becomes a mess, right? So that's very clear what the problems are, right? Have you seen those before?
I have. And now I have a question for you. So I know how you just mentioned, you might have one SDRs that might be feeding 4 or 5 AEs, but I do also see a little bit of a problem with that as well. And now here's what I think. If you have an SDR that might be really good friends with 2 of the 5 AEs, he might only start feeding those 2 AEs leads. And then the other 3 SDRs be like, well, the SDR is not shipping me leads. He shipped John 15 accounts and he shipped Mike 2. So I think you might run into the issue where relationships between the SDRs and the AEs might actually hinder or hurt that relationship. I'd like to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, man, that becomes a problem, and if you haven't like solved that one in that case, it can be a big problem. What I've seen companies do to solve that is quite interesting. At the end of every month, they sit down with every SDR. They look at all the leads they've sourced for AEs, and they look at how many leads they've sourced for which AEs. And then if you're very skewed towards one end, they prohibit you from working any accounts for that AE. So there's a slight workaround. It's not nice and it's annoying and it takes a lot of management time. But yeah, like that's another broken consistent, right? Even one SDR getting a lot of accounts, and if the SDR can pick their accounts, they'll have favoritism. So that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Here's the other way that people do it. So to prevent that, the other way that I've seen people prevent it is say, okay, let's grab our 4 SDRs. We have 10,000 accounts, but they really don't need that many. So let's just give each SDR like 200 accounts, and we'll come back to it after 3 months, right? Mm-hmm. So you give the SDRs 200 accounts, and the accounts might be distributed exactly 50-50-50-50 across their 4 AEs, so they're happy. The problem is, like, out of your 200 accounts, maybe you start calling and emailing, and you realize that since the accounts weren't perfectly sourced and you don't know that all these accounts are exactly great targets, maybe you bump that, into 30 of your accounts are actually really bad fits. They don't need your product at all, right? And then another 30 tell you no really, really quickly. Like you talk to somebody very high level and they say no, and you don't want to just bother that account anymore. And one SDR might have that happen faster than the other one. So sooner rather than later, you're going to have one SDR who's worked all their accounts properly, and they need more accounts, and they just don't have any because you as the leader have not had the time to go back and give him more accounts, and you don't want them to cherry pick whatever they want. So you're holding all these accounts for as the leader. You don't want to distribute, and your SDRs are like, if you don't give me more accounts, I've already emailed this company 47 times, and I need more meetings, and you're not giving me accounts. I'm just gonna have to annoy the hell out of them. So I've seen that happen. Isn't that crazy, man?
That's funny. And I think it's a perfect time to talk about what we're talking about. How, you were saying after a certain amount of time, and I think the audience will love it, after a certain amount of time, it shouldn't be that SDR's lead anymore. I think it's a perfect time to go into that. And I mean, I think you mentioned about 4 months, which I think is great. Maybe we should touch on that and tell people that, just because it's your lead, it's not your lead forever. I mean, at some point, you can only bother somebody so much, and that's where you might have to make a transition.
Right. So that's what I was calling, account-centric account distribution. Yeah. And what I mean by account-centric account distribution is, let's not start with like, how many SDRs do we have and how many accounts do we have? Let's just start with like, let's build the team around the strategy. Yeah. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to decide as an organization, us, the SDR team or the company, what we want to do is we're going to have 3 different sequences for our 3 different personas. And my strategy is I want to go after accounts, and I'm going to put them through the sequence. And if they don't respond, or if they say no, we're going to give them, let's say, a 3 or a 6 month break, because we don't want to annoy them. And then we don't want to email blast them, and we want to go at it carefully. So that helps. However, okay, if we just decide to do that, do we still allow all the SDRs to pick their accounts? And if they can pick, then does that become a problem in regards to, oh, I have a favorite AE or whatever? Or how do we make it fair so that, one, hey, they can't pick, meaning they can't decide which AE they're going to sort, but also if they can't pick, whenever they actually need new accounts are available. Okay. So what do we do here? And what we were just talking about is an account dripping methodology. So here's what I've been doing. I order my accounts alphabetically, A through Z. And the reason I like A through Z is because it will naturally create a random mix of industries, territories, geographies for my AEs, right? So you do A through Z. And then if you have 4 SDRs, let's say you think each SDR can be working 400 leads at any given point. And the ideal 400 leads is as follows. Let's say you want them to make 100 calls a day or 50 calls a day, and then they're going to be sending 50 emails a day, right? And then in between calls and emails, you usually have 3 days. So if they call these 50 accounts or this 50 leads today, they got to wait 3 days to call them back. So what that means is they need the 50 for today, the 50 for tomorrow, the 50 for the day after, and the 50 for the day after. So maybe just 200 leads. 200 leads, and then they're working constantly. So imagine you start with A, you grab 20 accounts, right? They all have 10 leads each. You give those to SDR number 1. Then you grab the next, 20 accounts, 10 leads each, give them to the next SDR, next SDR, next SDR. And the key insight here is that you haven't just restricted them to those accounts. It's not like, I'll come back in 3 months and give you more. The insight is, as soon as your leads dip under 200, so maybe you give them 250, so they have a cushion, but as soon as you dip under 200, the next account in the alphabetical order that we're going is yours, right? And then what that creates is a constant drip where the SDRs are just working the leads properly according to the sequences you've established. They're never running out of leads. They don't have a way to do favoritism because they have, they're running through it alphabetically. And the system just works. Clients don't get annoyed. You don't spray and pray. You don't email blast, whatever. And then what I loved about what you added here is, tell us more about this strategy of like, okay, Tito, you're suggesting alphabetically, but maybe there's an improvement on that.
Yeah, so I use two different methods. Just like, I love your idea. I might actually implement that with my team. And there's two other things that we would do as well on our side. So say now you have that big pool, and each AE has 200, and it goes, or 250, and it goes below 200. What we like to do is two things. A is mirror your clients. So therefore, if your AE closes a deal, now what they do is they say, okay, we just closed the University of Florida. Now those leads that will come from that big pool and that drip will be through other universities or colleges that might be in Florida. So you might have Florida State, Jacksonville, Tampa. So because you've closed the University of Florida, you'll mirror that school and find every college university within that area, because now when you do start to build that trust and build that rapport with the prospect, at that point, you can almost mention that you're currently working with Florida. And companies and universities, if they know a university is using something, the other ones they have FOMO, the fear of missing out. So they're going to want to learn more as well. The second strategy, is the competitive. So therefore, if you do, for example, if your AE closes DHL as a client, you might want to go to that pool and have that same AE who just went through the exact process, talk the talk with that person that worked at DHL, but mirror DHL and now start going after FedEx, UPS, Canada Post, or any other logistics company or trucking company that might be in the US. So I think that is one way to add it to the pool, but I definitely think that drip campaign can be very, very successful if the process is done right.
Correct. So here's what I'm imagining. I think these are compatible, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to go target the highest likelihood of closing accounts rather than just going randomly alphabetical. But here's what I would do as a leader. I would say, okay, we have our drip that's initially going alphabetical A, B, C, D, E. But as soon as we start closing accounts, what I would do is I would reorder. I might grab all the universities in Florida and move them up in my list. So it might be A, B, A, universities in Florida, C, D, right? And then the rest. And what that creates is, as soon as an account closes, I'm still having the SDRs going one by one for the accounts. They can't just cherry pick. And then there's two things that I always hold true is, one, what determines if you can target an account is one thing and one thing only, which is this account has not been touched for, let's say, 4 months by anybody else. And number two, no SDR can own any account for more than a month, right? From the first moment you grab an account to the last touch you can do to that account, it's 1 month. And what that means is you will prevent SDRs from just holding an account and saying, this is mine, I'm going to keep it, and nobody can touch it. This happens so often, and it's so destructive because sometimes it's not your best SDR, but they're like, that's my territory, that's my account, nobody else can touch it. And like, I had this happen when I was an SDR. I had another rep who told me, no, that's a top 5 account for us, it's mine. And I was like, okay, but you've been trying to get a meeting with them for how long? And I was like, I don't care how long, it's mine. So I went to the VP, and the VP said, oh yeah, we've been trying to get into that account for 2 years, and we haven't been able to do so. I said, can you give it to me for a month and I'll get you a meeting? He said, no, I won't give it to you. It's not your territory. I'm like, come on, man. Like, what the hell? Dude, 3 months go by. I go back and I insist again, can you give me that account? Dude, they give me the account. This is when I was at reputation.com. The account was Uncle Bob's Storage, 580 locations. It's the fourth or fifth largest storage company
Yeah.
in the nation. We already were working with Public Storage and Extra Space. And I literally took me 2 weeks, dude, and I got a meeting. And
Yeah.
the VP of sales was, holy shit, dude, like we've been trying for 2 years, unable to get a meeting. You take 2 weeks and you get it. And it's because certain strategies, certain mindsets, certain like I had gotten already like another 100 meetings with storage, with public storage accounts, because that was like an area that I really loved and specialized in, and I knew very easily how to sell them. So it worked out for me, man. So I like the fact that we have a system that will prevent SDRs from just taking ownership and never giving it out. So for me, maybe I'm being a little bit extreme here with my 1 month. Maybe you can do 2 months, but for sure, do not allow your SDRs to just grab an account and hold it forever, unless, and there's a very specific unless here, unless you have in some way, shape, or form AEs that have their top 10 strategic accounts, and they want to work very closely in pair with one SDR to go target those accounts, which I don't think it's incompatible with the system we're saying, because what I would do is if each SDR needs to be working 250 leads at any given point, I'd give them 50 that are constant, that are the 50 that, they're going to be working strategically with their AE, and the other 200 are cycling through. But that would be the only instance where I would allow an SDR, if they're paired up with your AE, to hold an account for a long period of time. Other than that, turn them.
Yeah, and I would say that responsibility comes to your sales manager. I think you have to build the process in the forefront and have that all laid out so your SDRs understand that after a certain point. Because I remember way back in the day when I was doing it, it was like, I'd be working on a client for 4 or 5 months. Marketing would by accident send an inbound lead to another sales rep, and he'd think all of a sudden it's his lead. So you're always going to have a little bit of confrontation, but I think you have to have that process that after a certain amount of time, that prospect becomes open. Because the last thing you want to do is have one person say, I'm going to take that prospect, it's mine forever, and you lose a sale because they were bothering them, they were emailing too much. You want to keep making that change because, maybe a prospect wants to hear a new voice. But sometimes it works out well, but I think definitely the sales leader needs to put that process in place at the forefront.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with that so much, right? Like hearing a different voice. I think that even within an SDR team, different people have different strategies. Some people write emails in a funny way. Others are very direct. Others, when they call, they're very like straight to the point. Others are more chitty chatty, right? So like if you've kept the same prospect with the same SDR for a long time, you've tried that strategy and it doesn't work. So
change it up.
Even for us, we experiment with we experiment with things like the first time we call you, pick up the phone, you might say, hey, this is Shawn. And we say, hey, Shawn, this is Tito. I'm with Alti Sales. I was just hoping to speak with you briefly. Do you have 2 minutes? Right? And if you are like, I'm super busy, goodbye, and you hang up on me, what we're going to do is we have that noted. We have what phrase did we use to try to get you on the phone? And then the second time you pick up the phone, it's like, hello, this is Shawn. And it's a different person calling, and they'll say something differently. They might say, hey, Shawn, hey, sorry I'm calling you out of the blue. I was just hoping to take 27 seconds to explain why I'm calling. Is that fair? Right?
Yeah.
And now, I know you might be like, oh, that aligns with my personality. Sure, it's fair. I'll give you 27 seconds, right? So by mixing it up, your chances of booking an account just go higher and higher.
Funny enough, we actually did about a month ago, we had that same thing where one of my SDRs said exactly, hi, my name is Shawn. I'd like to speak to you. And the guy gave no time of day. But then I had my other SDR and I said, listen, try this. Let him know that you're cold calling him. So in the first second, he goes, hi, John. This is actually a cold call, but all I want is 30 seconds of your time. And the guy actually on the other line goes, you have 30 seconds, go. And he actually ended up getting the meeting booked by just at the forefront saying, don't introduce yourself. Just say, this is a cold call. Be honest. I am cold calling you. This is a cold call. I need 30 seconds. If you do that, I find the prospect, they'll usually give you 30 seconds. If they won't, well, no. But you got to change it up because voices, male, female, there's different ways to do it. And you got to try different things.
Right. And then, this is what's funny. A lot of people are trying to find the silver bullet when it comes to sales development. And I want to explain this a little bit because there is none. The silver bullet is constant change. And what I mean by that is like let's say you have 7 different ways. If you actually like start trying and measuring those, you'll find that like your best strategy works 70% of the time or 80% of the time. And people say, okay, sure, let's talk. Your second best might be 63. Your third best might be 58. Your fourth best might be like 52, whatever. But here's the funny thing. If you grab the 20% for whom strategy number 1, which is your most effective strategy, didn't work, and you try strategy number 2 or 3 or 4, it has a much higher chance of working than if you keep trying the old same thing over and over again. Because what happened is your strategy number 1, which tends to work really well, just doesn't match the personality of the person who you're calling. And they want a different phrasing, a different methodology, a different, whatever else. So I encourage people to not try to find a silver bullet, but find your best strategy, use that 80% of the time, and then start testing things out the other 20. And if you do that, like Shawn and I, you'll have a team that's constantly improving and getting better all the time.
Yeah, and one thing to say on that is I always tell people, even on the SDRs, if everyone goes this way, you always want to be outside the box. So if you're making a cold call or doing anything and you think yourself, well, there's probably 1,500 other SDRs in the world making the same cold call with the same script, the same introduction, all that stuff, be different. It's like, on an example, I like to play poker as a hobby. So when I go to a poker table, if every single person at the poker table is quiet, I'm the loudest. But if everyone at the table is loud, I'm the quietest. So you want to be different. And that's the way you'll stand out as an SDR in your emails, in your calls. Try and do, if you think everyone else is doing the same thing, make a little bit of a change.
Awesome. Cool, man. I think we're running out of time. This has been a lot of fun. Any last questions, comments? Where should people find you? Last message for the audience.
Yeah, no problem. You can email me at Shawn, SHAWN, at AutoKlose.com, and that's AutoKlose with a K. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there. I'm very active, always engaging, always in different conversations. Those would be the 2 best places to find me.
Awesome. Same here. I think LinkedIn for me is the best. Tito Bort, and then our names will be in the title of the podcast. This might be posted on YouTube. We're going to try to post it different places. So, if you send me a LinkedIn invite saying, checked out the podcast, it was awesome, I'll definitely accept you. And we constantly are posting cool things, ideas on how to improve your sales development team. So thank you everybody for listening, and see you in the next one.
Thank you.